Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Experience Investigators quarterly webinar. My name is Paige Flanagan. I feel like April just zoomed right up on us, and we are so excited to share this content with you. A little bit of housekeeping. I know we've got people still kind of coming in, so take your time, get comfy. We got a lot of good stuff that we're going to share with you this afternoon. The Q&A is open, so please stick around to ask your questions and engage with Jeannie at the end live. So if you have questions during it, feel free to drop those in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will snag those and bring them to Jeannie's attention as they become relevant. In case you guys didn't know, Experience Investigators is a CX firm that Jeannie started 15 years ago. We focus on working with organizations of all kinds all over the world. We empower them to become more customer-centric organizations that get higher return on their investment of CX through workshops, online training, strategic advising, and so much more. My name is Paige, in case you haven't met me, and I have worked with Jeannie and Experience Investigators for almost 2 years now, even though it feels like it was just yesterday, as their Director of Partnerships. I love getting to meet with you guys and get to know you guys and have calls with you guys and just meet all of the amazing CX leaders that are out there. So if you would like to talk with me about working with Jeannie or having Jeannie maybe come speak, do a keynote at your organization, we love to do stuff like that. So my email is paige@experienceinvestigators.com, and I will drop that in the chat. Please feel free to spam me all you want. I would love to hear from you. So now onto the fun stuff. Jeannie, our founder, an in-demand keynote speaker and podcast host, will be leading this webinar, What the C-Suite Needs to Know. So buckle on up and welcome Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Paige.
Of
It's great
course.
to see everybody here. We had a lot of interest in this, and we heard from a lot of people today saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't be there, but will there be a recording?" Yes, you will get a recording after this. So everybody who registered will get a recording of this webinar, and we're just really glad that you're here. So thank you so much. And Paige will be watching for those Q&As. The Q&A is open, so make sure you take advantage of that. So with that, let's dive in. We always have a little too much, right? A little too much content, but that's okay because we know this is really valuable to everybody who is coming in here. So you heard about Experience Investigators. You heard a little bit about me. I have been in the space for more than 20 years, even though I started this firm 15 years ago. And for those 20 years, I've really had one mission, and that's to create fewer ruined days for customers. And anybody in this type of work, we all know that sounds so simple, right? It sounds like something we should all be able to do. But in organizations, we have to deal with organizational structure. We have to deal with bosses. We have to deal with different teams. We have to deal with technology and tools and process and policies and all the things that make it harder than it should be. And we also can't just do that. We can't just say, well, let's make a great experience and hope for the best. We have to speak to our C-suite. We have to make sure that the leaders in our organization absolutely understand how critical customer experience is, not just as something that is nice, but it's absolutely a business driver in your organization. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we are going to talk about what your C-suite needs to know, how to empower leaders to prioritize customer experience. We are in a really interesting moment in time, and people are dealing with all sorts of different unpredictabilities that are in front of us. Some people aren't sure about their next budget, about their next leader. I've talked to people who have had 4 bosses in a year. When that stuff happens, it's really hard to make sure that we are speaking the right language. And that's what I want you to do today, to think about how can we show up as leaders? How can we make sure that when we walk in the room, people aren't thinking, oh, that's nice, customer experience. They're thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to hear what this person has to say because I know that their information is so valuable, connected to our customers, connected to the results of our organization. And guess what? We're going to make everybody else's job easier. So we're going to go over a whole bunch of stuff today. I would love for you to think about what can you take away today as far as language, as far as how you show up, and as far as some of the tools that we're introducing, so that when you walk into the room, people don't just see somebody talking about customers. They see a strategic leader. They see somebody who is going to lead the company through all of this unpredictability that we have in front of us. So we're going to talk about how to align CX with business growth. I'm using the term business, but we work with all sorts of organizations. We work with nonprofit, we work with government, we work with utilities. Some of those might not see themselves as a business. When I use that term, please know I'm including you and your organization. We want to foster collaboration between teams to create a unified approach, and we want to leverage technology and customer insights. And at the end, we will offer a free resource that will really help you identify what is the next best step for your CX strategy. And Paige and I are available to actually go over those results with you. So I hope that you have fun, that you let me know, what you need in this, and that we will do our best to answer all of those questions. So let's get this out of the gate. CX is not just a nice to have. It's profitable. It is absolutely profitable. Sometimes when I talk to leaders like you, what I hear is they are asked to do reporting. Well, what should my scorecard look like? What should this look like? All of that is very important. But if all we're doing is talking about customer feedback, we're actually not creating change in our organization. That's a hard reality, but it's true. What we need to do is make sure that we are not only taking in the feedback of the organization, but we have such a clear vision of what we need to do to make sure that we are gaining profitability with every investment that we make. We are speaking the language of our leaders. We are making the strongest business case we can for the investments that we know are important. Because CX is absolutely a growth lever that the C-suite can't ignore. What happens, and I've seen this happen so often, and it breaks my heart every time. Somebody gets an idea and they say, we have to become more customer centric, or we have to build a customer experience team. And that team turns into what I call number narrators. This is when we start reporting on things like, well, customers are reporting this in customer satisfaction surveys. They're telling us this in their net promoter score. And the numbers go up and down, and it's hard to control. And it's hard to even understand why those numbers are going up and down. And after a while, the C-suite looks at these leaders, at these teams, and says, you know what? What are we really doing? This isn't valuable to me. I'm trying to gain more revenue and decrease expenses. That's what profitability is. Now, that comes in a whole bunch of different ways, but if we are not speaking that language, then we are really not going to move the needle, both with our organization and with our leaders. So here are a few macro things that I want you to know. Satisfied customers are 3.6 times more likely to make a recommendation, 3.3 times more likely to trust, and 2.6 times more likely to purchase more. And all these things are related because if we are more likely to trust an organization, then that's why we would give the recommendation. That's why we would purchase more. When all of this comes together, this is why it is cheaper to keep a new customer rather than gain a new one, or keep a current. Let me say that one more time. Keep a current customer rather than gain a new one. It is so much more expensive to acquire a new customer. So when we look at the results like this starts making the case for us. When we have these macro goals, we can start figuring out what would that mean to our organization if we had 3.6 times more recommendations. What would that mean to our organization? In some cases, in many cases, that means millions of dollars. So we have to start asking these questions. What would that mean here? This is also a good time to get to know your financial team. Ask them for help here. Say, I want to understand, what is the value of a customer? How can we really make sure that we understand what the value of a referral is? Referred customers actually are more likely to sign up quickly. They are more likely to spend money faster, and they are more likely to be retained as a customer. So referrals are absolutely critical to this. Here's the flip side. After a negative interaction, 51% of customers reduce or stop spending with a brand. This is from a Qualtrics study from 2024. So this is pretty recent. Customers are now using their feet to vote on how you're doing. They are just walking away. We're seeing this now today. We are seeing this in some results that you may have heard about based on how customers are saying, hey, I want you to not only listen to me, I want you to align with my values. I want you to make my experience better along the way. I need to trust you as an organization. And the minute that trust is eroded, this is what happens. So when we are making our business case, one of the ways that we can speak to our leaders is about building trust and protecting the reputation of the brand. When brand reputations are sullied, they are a lot harder to rebuild. So this is one of the ways that we can start thinking about this as well. Customer-centric companies are 60% more profitable than companies that don't focus on customers. But here's the challenge. What does it mean to be customer-centric? We have to define that. As CX leaders, we have to show up and define what good and successful customer experience means specifically for our organization and our customers. If you have some sort of goal or vision around customer experience that sounds like we're going to provide exceptional customer experiences, that's it. Or we all know what a great customer experience is. We cannot speak in those vague terms. We have to get specific about what it means at our organization. 86% of buyers say great customer experiences increase their willingness to pay more. We can all relate to this as customers. There is a reason we splurge on some of those vacations, right? There is a reason that we will invest in higher quality products after we get to know a brand because we trust that brand. So we need to make sure that we are looking at the customer journey end to end and figuring out what can we do to increase trust throughout that journey. Customer-centric organizations reported 41% faster revenue growth, 49% faster profit growth, and 51% better customer retention. So again, think about this. If you had 51% better customer retention, what would that mean for your organizational results? That would be incredible, right? That would be amazing. So we really have to make sure that we are thinking about what are those results that we are trying to achieve for our organization, not just for our customers. Here are some of the questions that I hear from leaders like you. How do I prove the ROI of CX to the board? The ROI of CX, we are asked to prove this a lot, right? What are the biggest organizational obstacles to success? How do I get the COO and the CFO and maybe the CMO and the CRO, whoever sits in that C-suite, on board with CX goals? And how do we make CX everyone's job, not just the CX teams? All of these are really important questions. What I want you to think about is, number one, have you defined what success looks like for your organization? Do you know the promise that you've made for your customers no matter what? And is that socialized throughout your organization? Because if we can tie those things together, the vision of what we want for our customers, the absolute success definition for what that means for our organization, and the results that we're looking to achieve, and get our COO and our CFO and everybody else to understand this is beneficial for everyone, then you start moving the needle towards that customer-centric culture. But none of this is a straight line. None of this is a perfect formula. So this is the framework that we use called CXI Navigator. And we've developed this over years because what I started seeing was that, there are all these linear processes out there. But sometimes you're starting from a different place on your customer experience journey. So while in an ideal world, this is a Venn diagram, this is something that brings everything together in the middle with intentional leadership, cultural commitment, customer collaboration, and experiential innovation. When we get those pieces right, that's when the magic happens. Sometimes you are further ahead on the cultural side, where people are starting to get this is important. They just might not know how. Sometimes you're further ahead on customer collaboration. You might have a really robust voice of the customer program. You might have a way to report on those feedback metrics and feel really strong in that. But how do we turn that into staying ahead? That's where experiential innovation comes in. Think about the last several disruptors of the last decade plus. Almost all of them have been experience disruptors, not product. So if we are not thinking about disruption in our own industry through experience, someone else is. Someone else right now today is planning to disrupt your industry through a better experience. We have to stay ahead. We have to make sure we're using the information, the feedback from our customers, the action that they take, the behavior, the analytics, all of those things, because that will give us insights to take the right action to get the results that we're talking about. But all of it comes back to intentional leadership. CX is not just a metric, it's a multiplier. So, what do I mean by intentional leadership? This is where we have to define our business case for customer experience. So, we need to link CX to key performance indicators like retention, revenue, and customer lifetime value. Even beyond that, we want to look specifically at our organization and speak the language of our leaders, speak the language of finance. What is the revenue impact when we invest in this? What are the cost savings? How does this help us with churn reduction? When we really look at all of those different things, when we think about some of those stats that I showed you in the beginning, what would it mean to get 1% more retention for your organization? Then you're talking dollars and cents. You're showing how you are not only investing in the experience for your customers, but you are investing in the success of your organization. That's what your leaders need to hear. We also want to align CX goals with strategic pillars like market share, operational efficiency, and innovation. Sometimes it's hard to show the revenue right away. So I always challenge leaders that we work with to think about what would happen if we had fewer service calls. We didn't have as many repair trucks rolling out. What if we could find ways to capture efficiencies that lead to lowering expenses? That is also a way to show that you are making your organization money. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. So we want to establish a foundation for success. And the way we do this is we want to define what success means and how it will be measured. I have seen goals around customer experience that say things like, well, we're going to be best in class at customer experience. And I say, great, how are we going to measure that? And they don't have an answer. So after 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, people start scratching their heads saying, well, why are we investing in this? This is where I want you to show up as a leader. This is where I want you to think strategically. So define what success means and how it will be measured. You can do that in a variety of ways. We have the feedback metrics. If you have a goal, if somebody on the top says, we have to get net promoter score up to XYZ, then great, that can be one of your goals, but it can't be your only goal. You have to then think about what will that do for your organization. So if we get NPS up, first of all, that's a measurement, not really a goal. So what we want to do is use that measurement and say, okay, we have to look for ways to invest in improving the experience in order to achieve that measurement. And if we can do that, we can achieve operational efficiency in the following ways. We can achieve revenue in the following ways. We can achieve more retention, which leads to XYZ. We really have to pull the thread to make that business case, but we have to get very clear on how it will be measured. We want to set goals that are tied to the overall organizational success. Do not put yourself on an island. Customer experience is part of the bigger organization. So that means if you have a goal of achieving more market share, well, how could customer experience efforts influence that? Well, if I heard that goal, I would say, well, if we want more market share, we need more referrals. We need more retention. We need more win backs of customers who have left us. So those are the types of ways that you can start looking at measurement. It doesn't have to be just feedback. This is about understanding that idea that this is a combination of things. There is no one magic metric. And then we cannot do this on our own. When we talk about improvements to the customer journey, we are often the messenger, but we don't have the authority or the accountability to make the changes we need. It is very difficult to change how customers feel about their experience when they keep telling you over and over, hey, this digital experience is not doing it for me. And the digital team shrugs their shoulders and says, well, that's not my job. We have to make sure that we are building those coalitions and helping them see that if they get that right, if they help us improve this, guess what? We're all going to win because that's going to help us with our organizational goals. So we have to think about organizational goals. We have to think about our cross functionality. We have to think about what are the actual ways that we can pull the levers that we need to on the effort here. CX teams that collaborate cross-functionally are 27% more likely to have high or very high ROI on their CX program. We cannot do this alone. If you are trying to just be the messenger, I have bad news for you about what happens to messengers. We have to get really clear on what our message is. Sometimes our message is, this number is not going up. This is not changing for customers because it's not changing for customers. It's not about what they're telling us every month if we're not taking that and turning it into action. So we have to take those insights, turn them into action. And if the people who have the authority and accountability are not making those changes, we need to say that. We need to say that, you know what? This is what we've learned. Customers are telling us with both their actions, their behaviors, and their feedback. And yet we're not changing anything. So how do we expect this to change? We have to get real about what we're doing. Sometimes I say customer experience is about the hard truths. So we have to be sure that we are presenting why this is important. This is why it comes back to, hey, if we do this, the expected outcome is that we will have a better organizational outcome for everyone. Internal misalignment means external inconsistency. We've all felt this as customers, haven't we? Where you have one experience as when you first start, and then later on in your journey, it's a completely different experience. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not what they promised earlier. When we have that misalignment inside the organization, customers absolutely feel that. So we have to make sure that part of our role as CX leaders is to get that alignment within our organization. And in an ideal world, great CX starts at the top. But really, it starts throughout the organization. This is a cultural change. We are change agents as well as leaders. Because once we have empowered leaders, that's where we get the engaged teams and exceptional experiences. Now, one way to align everybody is to make sure that everybody understands who are we to our customers, no matter what. This is not about your products. This is not about your services. This is about who you are and what makes you different. Sometimes I talk about how I will talk to different organizations like banks and say, well, what is it that, what's your customer experience mission? And they say, well, we're a safe place for money. Well, that is literally the definition of a bank. So we have to get really clear on what makes you different. I worked with a law firm that said, the feedback that they got, people really appreciated that they showed up with humility, that they weren't overconfident in what they were doing, that they weren't arrogant. So we wove that into their customer experience mission because your customer experience mission is your North Star. This is something you can get everybody around. You can train leaders to model these CX values in everyday decisions. You can really make customer outcomes part of performance reviews. You can recognize and reward CX success, not just output. And we want to give teams the tools and trust to act in the customer's best interest. So this is a guiding statement for your organization around what the experience should be for each customer every time. So you have your mission statement, and then you define your business case through what we call a success statement. That gives you the foundation to really make those strategic decisions and show up for the C suite and say, this is why. So as we go through this, one of the things that we need is that cultural commitment. This is not just about the CX team or customer facing individuals. This is about everybody. So as we move through and start socializing some of these things, we want to make sure we're discussing outcomes, not magic. When we start talking in vague terms like we're going to be great at customer experience, people don't see themselves in that. They don't understand the benefit of it. So a CX success statement identifies what specific outcomes will be most meaningful, how those specific outcomes tie back to larger organizational goals and leadership goals, the metrics you'll use for success, the realistic parameters, all of those things. We want to connect financial outcomes directly with feedback and actions whenever possible. So we want to start by aligning CX to goals that matter most. So ask your leaders, talk to your C-suite. What is your goal, Chief Marketing Officer? What is your goal, Chief Financial Officer? How can we help with that? How can we make sure that we are moving forward with the right efforts that will get that return on the investment? And of course, silos kill CX, collaboration fuels it. So this is why we have to constantly build coalitions throughout our organization. A unified CX approach starts with cross-functional collaboration. So when we think about an org chart, a lot of times we think about the customer journey based on our org chart, but customers don't see that. They don't see departments. They don't care who owns the task. They care about how it feels. And so we want to make sure that we are looking at the entire journey and then bringing in the right teams and departments to make it better for the customer. So instead of saying, I'm in marketing, you're in sales, you're in CX, we want to say, we're all here for the customer. So let's talk about how we can make that a more seamless, consistent journey, because we know that will lead to these results. And then, of course, we have customer collaboration. This is where we have voice of the customer programs. We have feedback. We have customer advisory boards, ways that we can include the customer in the actual process and development and design and improvement of the customer journey. So we need that universal CX language that we can really encourage everybody in our organization to use. And we want to celebrate CX wins throughout the organization. That's one way to bring the customer into the organization, is to celebrate those wins. And we want to create a cross-functional CX team. We have some resources on our site about this, where when we talk about a cross-functional team, sometimes people think, oh, that's like customer experience and customer insights and maybe, digital. And what we're talking about is when we discover some of those issues that are preventing a customer from having the best experience, we want to bring in those teams to talk about how can we improve that on behalf of the customer, who's responsible for what is the real accountability? Because if we don't have accountability over this, if we don't have the empowerment that we need to say, hey, we need your help on this, then it's really hard to make the improvements we need to deliver on the business case that we promised. At the end of this, why are we doing all of this? Well, we're doing this because we want to stay ahead. We want to make sure that we are ahead of our competitors, staying ahead of our customer expectations that are changing all the time. And so when we talk about experiential innovation, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about using the information that we get, those insights that we gather from both feedback and behavior and operational metrics, comparing that to what we want to promise to our customers. Are we always delivering on that? And then thinking about, how do we disrupt? How do we make sure that we are constantly giving a little more with the customer experience to stay ahead? Because that's how you get big ROI on what you're doing. And so we use something called a CX priority matrix. This is where we have we want to use the mission statement and the success statement. We want to get really clear on those things, because then we can prioritize what will have the biggest impact, what will have the lowest impact, where do we want to invest. It's really, really easy for everything to feel like a priority in the work that we do. It is very easy for that. We are constantly pulled in too many directions. Using something like this, where you think about how feasible is this and what is the impact, and then you can make that case. You can say, you know what, this will have high impact, but right now it's not very feasible because of the technology we're using. Make your case. Say, okay, I want to invest in better technology. And the reason is because it will have this impact on the customer experience, which will drive this revenue or these savings of expenses. It will help us in the following ways as an organization. We have to make a business case again and again and again. Tech is the tool, CX is the strategy. So just investing in tech is never enough. Technology, though, especially technology today, it's amazing. It helps us listen better, respond faster, and deliver consistently, but only when paired with strategy. What I want you to know today is that it's very easy to be what I would call vendor led, meaning that somebody comes to you and says, look at this amazing technology. And you think, oh, that's the answer. But you have to know exactly what the question is and the answer that you want. And so that means that you have to define a strategy around customer experience. Companies that do this well, though, companies using CX tech effectively are 3 times more likely to outperform competitors. So this is something that I really want you to consider moving forward. If you are using technology that you feel like is not serving you and is holding you back, make that business case. Start with your CX strategy, break that down, and talk about why an investment in technology would be the right answer for you right now. And we can't have a discussion about CX right now without talking about AI and generative AI specifically, some of the amazing things out there. Now there's agentic AI. We want to use and embrace AI. It's here. We have to do that. And it will help. It will absolutely help automation. It will help with personalization for customers. There are all sorts of different things. But we want to use it to enhance, not replace the human touch. That is very, very important. We also want to invest in tools that help us listen and respond in real time. And we don't want to drown in data. It's very easy to just capture data for data's sake. And when we do that, data without action is noise. Insights are what drive loyalty. We have to look for insights. So when we're talking about gathering feedback from customers, when we're talking about voice of the customer or listening programs or anything like that, I want you to think about things to do and things not to do. Because some of these programs are really expensive. They're big investments. So we have to really think hard about how are we respecting the customer and their time and their feedback? How are we closing the loop with them? So we want to use surveys plus behavioral data to identify pain points. Humans are weird. We say one thing and we behave totally differently. So we want to make sure that we're looking at how are they behaving as well as what they're telling us. We also want to tag feedback by theme and business impact. This is why it's so important to understand your organizational goals and to understand what you're measuring, because that way you can really look for the impact, the things that will have the most impact on those outcomes. We want to close the loop, of course, show the customers their voice matters. And we want to share customer stories with departments. This is one of the ways that you build that culture. You start sharing stories of, you know what, we made this change. Here's what happened. Here's some of the great feedback we got. Here's some of the ways that they're moving through the journey more. They're buying more. They're taking that next step. They're converting. Whatever it is, we want to share that with the departments, with the teams who actually helped us in that moment and invested in the journey. Here's what not to do. Collect feedback for curiosity. I see this a lot. Well, let's have a survey that asks this, this, and this. Let's ask a billion questions. If we don't have an action plan for that, if we literally don't know what we're going to do with that, we are probably wasting everyone's time. So be very clear about what will you do with these insights. If you, for instance, are asking about a technology that you know you can't change, right now, oh, we've got a license for the next 5 years. We're not changing that. Well, don't ask. Because if you say, what's your opinion? And they say that technology is terrible and you don't do anything for 5 years, that is sending a message. So we want to be really clear on what is the action plan we can take after collecting this feedback. We don't want to report on complaints without action plans. This is something that, again, can be the messenger role. And I want you to lead. I want you to show up as that strategic leader. So strategic leaders always have a plan. They say, okay, we got this complaint, but I want to actually figure out, here are a few ideas for how we can address it. Here's the business case for why we want to invest in this improvement. We need to show up that way. Ignore early indicators. If we ignore early indicators because not enough customers are affected, but we know in our gut and based on the results that we want that that will have a greater impact over time, then we sometimes have to stand up for that and say, okay, this is showing up. I think it's an early indicator. Here's what we want to do. If we can prevent big issues from happening, that is also a way to prove ROI. So we want to look at that and say, okay, if we prevented this from going further, how would that impact what we're seeing? So if you're getting a bunch of service calls, and when I say a bunch, maybe it's a handful, but you're starting to see a pattern, something's not quite right. What if you could prevent those service calls to begin with by solving that problem before it becomes a huge issue? We need to show up and understand those early indicators. And then let's not send a survey for everything. People are over-surveyed. Survey fatigue is real. If we send a survey for every single thing, customers are not going to trust us. We're not going to get the insights we want, and we won't have the action plan to really build on that. So I have also seen where I've been in meetings where leaders will say, wow, I can't believe that's happening. Like maybe we heard about it from one customer. I can't believe that's happening. That's terrible. Well, let's send a survey to see if it's happening to a lot more. If it's the wrong thing to do, and we all agree it's the wrong thing to do, then make it the right thing to do. Fix it. We don't need a survey to tell us that. When we talk about being data-driven organizations, sometimes I think we talk ourselves out of our intuition and the things that we just know are the right thing to do. Now, we have to make business decisions sometimes, and we can't make everything right for every person all the time. But if there is something that we all agree as leaders is wrong, then we need to fix it. We don't need surveys to tell us that. Unified teams plus smart tech, this is next level CX. So I wanted to show you, I wanted to walk through some of the thinking to really put together your strategic vision, your success statement. So this is a financial services organization. They said, we are dedicated to achieving these outcomes. And that was based on their overall organization. So they looked at their organizational goals and they said, okay, we're asked to be digital first, data-driven, improvement focused. So that's what we're focusing on. So this will serve our broader organizational goals by having increased customer engagement, increased customer loyalty, higher customer retention. And then you can pull that a little further and figure out, what does that mean dollars and cents if you could improve it 1%, 5%, 10%. Then we want to look at our leaders and think about really, what do they care about? What does our CFO care about? What does our CMO care about? Well, we're going to increase operational efficiency. We're going to have systems. We're going to have systems integration, streamline efficiency, automation, less manual processes. We're going to meet our customers where they are, providing convenient, friction-free solutions. Now, we have to get into, what does that mean for our organization? This is where working with your finance team can be very effective. Sometimes if you have a leader if you have a goal, for instance, of removing friction and everybody's on board with that, great. But have a way to track that. Say, we've removed 100 friction points from the customer journey. Because otherwise it's too vague, it's too amorphous. We have to track, we have to measure everything. We have to understand how we're measuring before we get started. Success will be measured using these metrics: products per household, reduced customer churn and attrition, new customer growth, number of referrals. So looking at what are the levers we can pull in customer experience to gain the results that our C-suite cares about. That's how we get their attention. Collaboration makes CX everyone's responsibility. The right tech helps CX scale. And we want to start small, stay strategic, and make CX the common language across teams. This is the growth lever the C-suite cannot afford to ignore. And we have to show up and start speaking differently. We have to define our goals differently. We have to make sure that we are making a business case along every step of the way. And when it all comes together, it's amazing. It's amazing, but it takes time. Everybody's on their own journey. So we have this tool for you at cxicompass.com where you can answer a few questions and we'll give you some ideas on, okay, it sounds like you're doing well with cultural commitment, but man, it sounds like you could focus a little bit more on customer collaboration. Here are some ways to do that. So we would love for you to take this on your own and then have a call with us where we'll help you go over the results. And sometimes I get asked, what does CXI stand for? And technically, it's investigation because we're experienced investigators. And I really believe that a lot of our work as CX leaders is investigation. We have to figure out root cause analysis. We have to really look into the numbers and gain those insights. So, yes, it's investigation, but we also like to think it's for all of these other things: insight, innovation, improvement, impact, all sorts of things. So, we hope that you've gained some of this by being here with us today. And I know we have had a few questions come in, so I would love to hear the questions that you have and do my best to answer them for you.
I'm
So,
back.
yay.
We've
Hi,
had
Kate.
quite a few questions come in. Lisa Abbott would like to know, would love to hear your thoughts or suggestions on how often you recommend sharing CX metrics with the organization. She does monthly reporting and the scores don't really fluctuate too much.
Mhm. Oh, great question. And Lisa, this is not uncommon. It is hard to make these numbers fluctuate, especially things like Net Promoter Score. That takes time. And it can be frustrating because a lot of times when we start a CX program, we do see those numbers because we kind of make a lot of improvements. Because if you're not looking to make improvements and then suddenly you are, and you have that investment and momentum, you can make a lot of improvements really quickly. Well, then it's harder because then we're starting to stagnate. So I would say think about what is that combination of metrics that will really get people's attention. So for instance, you might report on feedback metrics as part of things monthly or quarterly, but then you also want to highlight things that in that success statement we talked about, mention things like, okay, we also made these, 14 improvements this month in the following ways. Or we were able to get more adoption of our CRM system. Sometimes we have to get that tactical when we're reporting because that's still progress. So sometimes the way we measure success is I think about it in two ways. And part of that is because I use the full focus planner from Michael Hyatt, and he's the one who introduced me to this. So there's an achievement goal, which is like, check, we did it, or there's a habit goal. And those sometimes are what we need to focus on with customer experience goals, because sometimes what we need are people to more consistently behave a certain way, both customers and employees. So I would look at things like that. The other thing I really encourage everybody to think about, I've seen a lot of CX scorecards where it's metrics, it's graphs, things go up and down. Those don't move people like hearing the actual voice of the customer. So if you are not showcasing at least one, maybe a handful of call recordings, customer videos, testimonials, things like that, both good and bad, that's what gets people to understand the importance of this work. So if we are seeing things like, our delivery delays are really upsetting people, that might show up in your numbers, but it will definitely show up in what people are calling in about, right? So get creative about what metrics you're showing and also always include the real voice of the customer. That's what moves people. That's what gets people to understand how incredibly important this work is and how when we ignore it, when we neglect it, bad things will happen to the organization. And that's what we need our C-suite to see. So good luck with that. And I don't think there's a perfect answer for how often, but I do like when we show progress. And sometimes that's tactical and more of a list of things we've done, and that true voice of the customer to get that emotional connection with the people that we're reporting to as well. Good question.
So, as everybody knows, statistics are useful to put out there to represent things in the large. So, we had a couple questions asking where we got our statistics from and where they could also get some good statistics about CX from.
Yep. We have sources in all of these, but many of these are from reporting from McKinsey, from Qualtrics, from I think there's a Salesforce in there. So there are all sorts of reports that come out all the time. And so we just stay very connected to that. However, you bring up a really good point because these statistics alone are not the value to our leaders. They hear those and they go, great, what does that mean for me? That's why we need to extrapolate out what would it mean if? What would it mean if we could achieve, you know, we're probably not going to get to 51% more retention, right? Like maybe that's not realistic right away. But what would 1% look like? What would 3%? Because if we can extrapolate that, that's when we get into the dollars and cents that are so important. That's how we tell that story. So always source, always look for more recent data. Customer expectations are changing all the time right now. So we have to be really aware of that. And then anytime you can collect your own data, that you can have your own reporting on, you know what, we tried this, here's what happened. Because, I said at one point, start small, have a little pilot and see how it does. And then you can extrapolate even further from that and say, what if we did this at scale? So that's another way to approach building that all important business case.
Wonderful. So, how do I convince my organization's management team that customer experience teams are a must? Not everyone can take calls and chats, but they are part of this. Salman, excuse me if I said your name wrong, really wants to get real about this, but's not sure how to present it to their leadership team.
Good question. And I think one of the challenges that we have in customer experience is sometimes I say the math is harder because everybody understands that sales, it's just part of doing business, right? So when you build a business, you would never build a business and be like, well, we don't need a sales team. We don't need it. It's just going to happen. We're just going to do people will love our product and it'll sell itself. The reason that people think that with customer experience teams is because it wasn't that long ago that organizations could have customers kind of trapped. And before the internet, really, this happened a lot. There were two things that shifted all of this. One is the internet. So people started having more access to brands. Social media amped that up. So customers suddenly could directly speak to different organizations and they could talk back. That was the first time that was really available to people. The second thing is that the concept and idea and behavior around brand loyalty changed. It was very common. People would joke about, well, my mom used Tide laundry detergent, so I use Tide laundry detergent. People don't think and behave that way anymore. So what we have to do is make sure that we are constantly looking at how do we stay ahead of customer expectations. And this is where disruption can be a powerful argument. Think about Airbnb, think about Amazon, think about Uber, think about Netflix. All of those sold the same products as other organizations, but they did it completely differently. They changed the experience. And so that's what customers gravitated to. So if we are not thinking actively about disruption in our industry over experience, someone else is. Now, you asked specifically about building a CX team. These come in all shapes and sizes right now. They fit in all sorts of places in the org chart. Sometimes what we need is to start where we are. Maybe you're not going to get a huge team, but if you have a few dedicated people and you start doing things like, you know what, we're going to start highlighting when we do really well with customer experience. We're going to develop a CX mission and bring that around the organization. Those steps can help you build from the inside out and get the credibility and trust that you need in order to really get others to invest in that idea. We work with a lot of clients in this way where we sometimes are kind of the third party who comes in and helps facilitate a cross-functional discussion, even though nobody or maybe one or two people have CX in their title, but they still need a cross-functional team. And so there are so many ways to do this. There's no magic answer, but I would say make the case for the fact that you have to stay ahead in this way today, and that the only way to do that is to actually invest in customer experience strategy and customer experience management. Because the other thing I like to say is your customers are having a customer experience, whether you think about it or not, whether you're proactive and intentional or not. The difference is we want to design it proactively to not only get the best for them, but to get the best for our organization. And if we don't do that, we are leaving money on the table. Good questions. Good, meaty
Yeah,
questions.
great questions today. How do we navigate a culture where people recognize the need for change, but continue to perpetuate the current culture that is not working? We see this too often.
We do. We do. And really, it comes down to accountability. What are we asking them to do? Are we just expecting fairy dust to take hold across the organization? Because sometimes this is how we approach culture. We say things like, well, be more customer centric, everyone. We're going to be more customer centric. And in my keynote, sometimes I share a story of how I was working with the leader and he kept saying, we're going to put the customer in the center of everything we do. And I said, great. What does that mean? And he went up to a whiteboard and he drew a little circle and then he drew a bigger circle. And he said, that's the customer. What are people supposed to do with that? We have to give people real ideas, rules, processes, accountabilities. So that's why we always start with that customer experience mission statement, because then you can start doing things like saying, okay, did we live up to this mission or not? Have those conversations. Here's why we didn't. Oh, is it a process problem? Let's fix that. Oh, is it something, going on with supply chain? Well, let's set expectations differently. It allows you to really look at things in a very important way. Then we want to define success. And when we define success, what happens is we can roll that out to different teams and departments. So saying, when we say customer centricity, this is what we mean. These are the behaviors that we need. This is the feedback we're looking for. This is what makes us different. We can't always be all things to all people. We can't be the fastest and the most accurate at the same time. We can't. So, who are we? If we're going to be the fastest, let's say we're the fastest, but understand what that means. Well, when I say soon, does that mean 20 minutes, 24 hours, 2 weeks? This is the type of granularity we need to get into because then we can hold people accountable to it. And this is why you need that strategic leadership. You need to show up and say, this is who we are. This is how we're defining it. This is how we measure success. And here's what you, person, are accountable for. And then hold people accountable for it. It is not a magic wand situation. And that's why I say discuss outcomes, not magic, because it's too easy to talk about this as if it's magic. And you'll hear people, I know authors and speakers who love to talk about just do this, just be this, be the Disney of your industry. Well, no. You have to get so much clearer on that. You have to help people understand what are their roles, what are their behaviors, what are we looking for, what are the outcomes that they have a role to play in. And the more we can do that, that's when the culture starts changing. It is not an overnight process, though. It does take time.
It does, but it's so worth it when you get the steps right and you start seeing that change in slow little ways. And it's like,
Mhm.
it's there. We're doing it.
Love it.
So Mary asked a pretty meaty question. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, Mary. It is very complicated to build a financial report on benefits for such an intangible service like customer experience. We've heard a lot about that lately about, the benefits of customer experience can't all the time be measured. Like
Yep.
sometimes it is up and down. It's hard to track that in a numbers report. So what if you don't really have access to every single detail on cost avoidance, net ROI, plus what does 1% CSAT improvement really mean? You would need very detailed information. How do we do that if we don't have access to that?
Yep. Well, the one thing I would encourage you to do is really go to your financial partners, and they are often more willing to have these conversations than we give them credit for. They love this stuff. So if they have access to that, that's one way to start that conversation. There is no universal blanket way to say like 1% more CSAT equals this ROI. It depends on industry, it depends on all sorts of things. The other thing is CSAT is, or NPS, or any of these metrics, they are an indicator of how people are feeling. They are not showing how they're behaving. Sometimes I say that and people go, "Wait, what? What?" It's true. It does not tell us how they're behaving. It tells us how they're feeling in that moment when they respond. So, what that means is that if we can look at what is it we really want to happen here? Is it that we want more referrals? Is it that we want fewer service calls? Is it that we want more, more adoption of our program so that we can make that big change? We have to get pretty granular about what we're actually looking at because that will tell us more about their behavior. If you are connected to your contact center at all, this is another great place to go investigate. Find out what are people calling about. Talk to those frontline leaders. Talk to the people who are actually engaging with customers and say, if you could wave that magic wand, what do you think customers would want us to change? And maybe they'll say, oh, the refund policy. Everybody complains about it. Well, if the refund policy is and the return policy is causing angst, what happens is people will go through that and then not buy again. So look for numbers like that. What could you find out about that? Because we need access to this if we're going to lead. If your leaders are only asking you about feedback metrics like CSAT and NPS, I would challenge them. I would say, okay, this is telling us how they're feeling, but it's not indicating what's actually happening. So we have to really break down how do we make sure that we're looking at the right places. I think about this as a Venn diagram. Apparently, that's how I think about things because that's our framework and this is this too. But I think about we have feedback, which is what customers tell us, and that's CSAT and things like that. We have operational metrics. That's where we get into customer churn, return rate, refund rate, first call resolution, all those different pieces. And then we have things like behavior. So behavioral analytics of what are they actually doing in this moment. So if they are, now we have technology that can do things like if they're on our site and they're rage clicking, on the mouse, like because they're so frustrated, technology can tell us that now. So if we start seeing patterns there, if we're like, oh my gosh, they're frustrated here, they're telling us this over here, and our operational data is this, we want to look at what would happen if we could solve more problems in the first call. What kind of cost savings would that be? What kind of improvement in trust would that be? So if you don't have specific numbers yet, I would encourage you to ask hard questions to see if you could get there. And things like trust, reputation, things like that, sometimes you can gather enough from open social media, from looking at what are people saying about the brand. If you have any sort of referral system, look at that and say, what is that telling us? Testimonials, complaints, those places where people are telling you emotionally what's happening, that can tell a story as well. So you can start saying, hey, we are losing trust with our customers because of XYZ. If we invest here, I think we will be able to build trust, which we think will lead to further conversions or further or fewer refunds. So we have to get creative. And this is why I always say the math is harder because it's very easy to make the case, well, we sold more and so we have more customers, so we have more revenue. That's easy. What we have to do is think very strategically about, okay, how do we break this down so that it's not just about feedback metrics? That does not tell the whole story. It also is a measurement, not an outcome. So we have to look for what are the outcomes that we want. I wish I had an easier answer for you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, thank you guys for coming. We are pretty much at time, so I'm going to let Jeannie wrap us on up. And please reach out to me. I dropped my email in the chat. I would love to talk to you guys. Take Compass. We would love to meet with you guys and learn more about you. So thank you. I'll let Jeannie wrap up.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for asking these fantastic questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. We'll do our best to follow up with you in the next few days. We will sometimes we have too many to do that, so I don't want to overpromise. But feel free to attend our LinkedIn Live, which is coming up on Friday as well. We do those about once a month as well, so check that out. You can follow me on LinkedIn for that information. But don't forget that we have this tool for you that you can use to really identify where should you maybe invest more. Is it customer collaboration? Is it cultural commitment? Is it intentional leadership? Is it experiential innovation? All of them matter. It's really about making sure that we are staying ahead of our customer expectations, that we are providing the right information and data to our leaders, and that we are speaking the language of leaders. You being here tells me that you are a strategic customer experience leader. So go ahead and check this out at cxicompass.com, or we've got this handy dandy QR code. You can scan that here as well. And after you do that, Paige will reach out and we will be able to set up some time to go over your results. So thank you so much for being here. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, we have LinkedIn Learning courses. The Experience Action podcast, which is both on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, is another way for you to get your questions answered. You can leave me a voicemail at askjeannie.vip, and I will answer your questions on the podcast. You can find many resources at experienceinvestigators.com. And we just love supporting and empowering leaders like you. So reach out, let us know, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we will see you next quarter. Thanks, everybody.